Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Field of Dreams on ACTN. I'm Steve David and I'm your host. Today I want to talk a little bit about our football greats with great resumes. I have my panel who will help me discuss that. And at this point, I would take time to introduce the panel. Narada Wilson, welcome to the set, Narada.
It's always a pleasure to be here, Steve, and hopefully we have an engaging discussion today on the topic ahead.
I just love your shirt, bud.
Have to keep promoting.
Yeah. And we got Larry Joseph. Welcome to set, Larry.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
And you know what? Everybody decided to wear the shirt because of you doing that good job and promoting. So we want the viewers to see our shirts. And Jefferson George, welcome, Mr. Jefferson.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
You sure?
Yeah. Of course.
New shirt.
Yeah.
I like how you look in the shirt, too. Well done. Viewers, you can get the shirt at Field of Dreams Sports Complex in Point Fortin if you need one. I was just sitting and thinking, everybody try to, who's the best footballer, and that is very hard to figure out because everybody has different styles. It's so hard to pick who's the best footballer. So I thought the best resume in football is something we can talk about because resumes is something totally different. You could have the best resume but not be the best footballer. So let's talk about players who we think with the good resumes. And then at the end of the show, I hope we could come in agreement with who has the best resume in Trinidad and Tobago football. So, as usual, I would like one of you guys to take the lead and with this discussion. Narada, everybody pointing at you.
No. That's an interesting topic and something that falls into the line of work that, I've been doing for the last few years. Bringing a resume is easier for an agent or an agency or any stakeholder in football to kind of evaluate a player if they probably haven't seen them or it improves to the longevity. Coming down with the best resume would mean we have to say this was someone or persons that clubs or, management saw as somebody that could add value to a team, regardless of what division, what country and all of that, who was constantly on the tip of the tongues of most persons as to we need this player and he could add value or make the job easier for the agent or management. I would probably start off, in my era, just looking at TV growing up in football, and I would start with maybe Shaka Hislop, who, was a goalkeeper, was a player that, we saw growing up on the English Premier League, playing with him in FIFA, the Nintendo games. So that means you had to be up there where we saw all the other players. Shaka, for quite a long period, which is favorable to a goalkeeper because they tend to remain in teams or remain the number one if being good for a long period of time. But I think especially the highlight of reaching West Ham, that really meant something years ago to Trinidad and Tobago supporters. Shaka Hislop had an illustrious career, one that to this day he still bears fruit going forward because of the reputation and the longevity of his career in the English League. So I think we could talk about Shaka a little bit and touch on some of the clubs he played for. I will say I more knew him at the start of the West Ham. So I want us to kind of go through what were some of the clubs that he got
let's go through
introduced.
Shaka.
I think he did for
Portsmouth as well. Yeah.
Newcastle. Did he do
Newcastle, yeah.
Newcastle, yeah. I agree with Narada in watching television at the time when we had a real heavy dose of English League. Shaka was one that we could connect with because he was from this little island of Trinidad and Tobago. And Shaka actually was on the national team with me in 1990 when we had the Shell Cup, the one that was aborted due to the coup. Shaka was our number 2 to Brow. So that's the first time I actually met him in person. And it was good to know we had somebody at that pedigree in our camp. his father was close to the team because of him too. I think his father was a magistrate or something like that. Matter of fact, during that period, we had the national team. We staged a strike against TTFA for more money. That was in days of Jack Warner. Those were exciting days, you know. And but Shaka, to have somebody of that pedigree in the camp, and I must say, during my playing days, I always thought that our local goalkeepers were fantastic. I thought Trinidad produced fantastic goalkeepers.
Right.
I mean, when you talk about like Michael Maurice and even Shaka, who was always in Trinidad, most of the time he was outside. You know, I grew up people like Granville and Earl Carter and Millet and Hayden Thomas and those.
And Tony Clark.
And as you were saying, you know what I mean? We had fantastic goalkeepers in Trinidad, and I think it was good that somebody like Shaka could represent our ability. And we also remember that we spoke about Lincoln Phillips on the show previously. So Shaka was just continuing the rich legacy of goalkeepers from Trinidad and Tobago. And it was good that we could turn our television on and look at the highest level of football and see one of our own representing us. So yeah, and I mean Shaka was good. You can't be from Trinidad and go and say for no English team. You had to be good. Mm-hmm. You understand what I mean, right? Because you had to beat out top competition. In England, I thought England had some of the best goalkeepers in the world.
Correct. Yeah.
So for a club like West Ham to say, I will choose Shaka Hislop in front of my English prospects, it definitely is testament to his ability. I really think that Shaka, having performed at the highest level in England for more than one team for a period of time, definitely puts Shaka's resume very, very high up on the scale.
I think Shaka is a good one to start with. Shaka was actually born in England, right? So that allowed him the opportunity to also play for the English under 21 team, which he had a cap for them, and he also was on the bench for a full international game, right? I think against Chile or something like that. And the choice for him to choose to play for Trinidad, I thought was something that, for me, that always resonated, because he, at that point in time, having the option to play for England and Trinidad and Tobago, I think he is very well appreciated by local fans, right? The clubs that we already outlined, West Ham, Newcastle, and Portsmouth, where he did fantastic at all three clubs, and also locally for the national team. Who could forget him, playing in the World Cup? I thought he really, really set a very high standard, and has been somebody who, for me, has a outstanding resume, high pedigree.
To add to it, I just getting some information is actually he was first signed with Reading. So Reading, then to West Ham, and then you're talking Newcastle, Portsmouth, and then ending off in FC Dallas. And these are all clubs that we would look at and say, listen, that is all Premiership, top division, whether Reading at the time may have been for second, but Shaka, and keeping in mind that there was a point, I believe, as a transfer between West Ham and Newcastle, where he was actually the highest paid transfer for a goalkeeper ever, and that speaks volumes that the English, where, now we seeing goalkeepers go for these, exorbitant figures. Shaka was actually one of the first of being like even a black goalkeeper, so those little things, I think, sits really high and puts him really high in a resume factor, because all the clubs have been top class clubs, which means professionalism was on 100, and the guy really was able to sustain a long career in football.
Just on that point that you mentioned, being, at that point in time, breaking into professional football in England as a black person, he chose to carry, his Neil Shaka Hislop, and he chose to carry Shaka to identify, with his African roots and things like that. So, I mean, the story is a big one as well.
Yeah, and while we're on that, I just want to add, I don't want to miss the point, or the viewers to miss the point, how important that is in terms of his blackness and African culture, playing in a league that really did not give much opportunity to black players at that time. Even if we look at the present goalkeeper for Chelsea, Mendy, and you read where he says that he's thankful to Lampard for giving him a break, especially as a black goalkeeper. Because those are things that sometimes flies over the head of spectators and viewers. How difficult it is for black athletes in these predominantly white countries to break through. So when one of ours in the former Shaka was able to do it, that's no mean feat.
And I
That's
think
no mean feat.
it also adds to the resume, you know, because he was able to start. I think he has what is now the show races.
Show races red card, right.
Card. It was Shaka, and for him to be able to do that had to mean his CV spoke pretty high for them to take notice. Because, you know, any young or player of not a certain stature would not get that back in. And I think it speaks well to him as well, you know.
Keep in mind, though, I want you guys to realize resume. Resume has different categories.
Correct.
It could be education. It could be ability. It could be how many games we won or how many leagues we won, and all the different things. So Shaka might have been great and played in great, but never won any championship or never. He went to the World Cup, and you know all of that is.
I think he probably, yes,
involved.
not in terms of, I think there may have been one or two cups won, you know, the English cups. I think with Portsmouth, there was something he won there, the FA Cup,
final,
right? And so, yeah. But in terms of the resume for the clubs he played for, it speaks very high volumes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, especially if we're talking about local players and their resume, I think obviously the first item we have to look at is what clubs they play for, in what countries they played for, and the level that, and in Shaka's time, as it is even more so now, the English Premier League is considered one of the best leagues in the world, and at certain points of the history was considered the best league. So for me, if tomorrow I hear a Trinidad player is recruited to play for Sheffield United, who for last, they played in the Premiership. So that says a lot to me about the player's ability to be recruited. That team may come and get demoted the same year he goes there, but the fact that he's recruited for a team in the English Premier League, to me, adds value to his resume.
But he scored points on that portion.
I
But
mean, of course, if your team wins something, you go higher up on the Richter scale.
Okay,
right?
you got it.
Because how many players, now that we're discussing it, from Trinidad could boast of playing in the highest leagues in the world? And we could probably count them on one hand. You know, and well, that's what we're discussing here today.
Okay, so we have Shaka. So who's your, what about another one? You, Larry, or Jefferson?
Yeah, well,
I was no talking, let Jeff talk.
All right, Jefferson, you.
I think
give me another player.
once we're talking about resumes, you have to call Russell Latapy, all right? The little magician, right? A lot of young players. I was a goalkeeper, of course, and so that
Felt the magic.
that made what he did, you know, in a different world, really. You know, now you have the era of the sweeper keeper, and everybody thinks that, you know, going to be goalkeeper for Leeds number 10. But I mean, in my time, when I started to play, remember, we could have take the ball from a back pass. You could actually pick it up, right? People who play now don't even know that. You know?
Exactly.
But so the type of skills that he exhibited, 3 steps to it. You know, type of skills that Russell Latapy exhibited, and he played quite a lot of games here. So we were able to, you know, develop that bond with him as a local player before he went internationally. You know, playing in Porto, where he really, in Porto, as a big club. Porto at that time was a big European club, right? I believe he is the first Trinidad player to play in the European Championship, right? And at that time, to wear the number 10 for Porto as well, right? He was Porto's number 10, right? So I think internationally he was a figure. He had the MasterCard advertisement and all that type of stuff. extremely joyful to watch on the ball. And I think his resume, when you look at the titles that he would have won with different clubs, even going on into management, I think that's one that definitely ticks, at least the boxes on the field.
What kind of accolades did he? What did he?
Well, in terms of the local titles with Porto, they would have won the league championship. I think 3 years straight.
Correct.
Right, they qualified for the
Champions
League
Yeah.
With Falkirk as well. They came second. He played with Hibernian in Scotland as well. Won some cups with Hibs.
Yeah, and won the league as well.
Yeah, won the league with them,
Hibs as well.
Right? After quite a while, because they weren't Celtics and Rangers are the clubs that really dominated in Scotland, and with him coming in there, they were able to challenge for that top spot.
Yeah, and I think even when he went to Rangers, the accolades speak that they won the Scottish Cup the year he was there also for that season. So it really proves that everywhere he went, more or less, within that year, even I think when he went down to Falkirk, they also had a good showing, won 2 cups the time he was there as well. So it seems that Russell Latterby, anywhere he went, he was the player that added a little fuel over his period of time to actually bring these clubs to winning club championships or cup championships or the league itself,
What would you say, we have a minute before the break, but what would you say that will deter us from making decision Latterby because of his movement with so many different teams? Or why?
I think the movement may not be an issue so much as to the teams and their prominence in our region, because yes, you say Porto, Boa Vista in Portugal, but we don't have direct viewership to these leagues to follow it. If, for example, if I say Brazil will watch Portugal as a big move, once you get into there. And then I think the Scottish League, the Rangers and the Celtics, they're big teams. And he was there, and Hibernian as well. He's a legend for so many years. But I don't think there's a direct involvement with us following those leagues to understand, they still have a Hibs Celtic finals is as big as anything else around the world. But do we get that Classico every year on television? We kind of don't. So, I think that is what kind of makes us falter. Like, we like when we hear of him, if we heard of him in the English league, it may have represented more to us.
Okay, Larry, we'll come back with you after the break.
Okay.
Stay tuned, we're coming back.
One was a fantastic free kick, right? But that was...
We, from those encounters together, and this was a North-South game to open the season.
So the team might be playing well, as we always say with Trinidad and Tobago.
Futsal did that great for me.
Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Field of Dreams on ACTN. My name. Okay, viewers, welcome back. Okay, Larry, you up?
I get my 2 cents to talk about Russell, the magician.
Yeah.
Greatest footballer I have ever seen and played with in my entire life. And it's just an awesome privilege to talk about him because to be on the field with Russell Latterby is a dream. Russell evokes an image of somebody who, like how people see Messi, that's how we used to see Russell back in the day. You know what I mean? Russell, you don't get players, you get players like that every 50 years. Let me put it that way. So I was blessed to be in a 50-year period while Russell graced us with his awesome talent. Where do I start with Russell? The first time I saw Russell was 14 years old. I went to look at Trinidad under 13, under 14 in Skinner Park against Arrest, and this little Afro fella in the middle of the field. And I was reading an article about Chinapu the other day, and he was talking about Russell in that same game. When he see this little boy, and he would know, who is this man? And that was my first glimpse, and along with other people, of this Russell Latapy. And his reputation just took off after that. And then, fortunately for us, he came to Trinidad in 1988, still diminutive. And Russell, I mean, when, listen, I think I know words to describe Russell Latapy. Russell Latapy was a magician. It's as simple as that. Russell used to make football look so easy. There were things he would do on the field that would escape the normal eyes because he made it look so easy. I never saw Russell Latapy on the ground from a tackle or off balance. Never. I never saw. Strange again. I was reading an article from a former player who played with Russell, and he was saying the same thing. He never saw Russell on the ground unless somebody actually take him and trip him. You know, the ability to ride tackles against people 3 times his size and weight is awesome. His ability to turn defense into attack. Russell could pick up a ball on top of his 18-yard and progress it into the next team box effortlessly.
But that doesn't show up in his resume.
It does. Yeah. It does, because when we want to play Caribbean club games, anytime we stopped in a country and we land, the first question of everybody's lips, Latapy come?
Right.
Latapy here? So much so that Jamaica took him and Leonson Lewis. That was his first professional stint in Jamaica. He was a cult hero in Jamaica. Fast forward, he left and went into Portugal. And as Jeff was saying, no little small man from a nondescript country like Trinidad could walk into and wear a number 10 jersey in Porto. Yeah. Porto was a European powerhouse. And this little guy from Trinidad walked in there and take the number 10 off the rack and put it on.
Right.
You know, so that speaks volumes in terms of footballing ability. He went off into Scotland with Falkirk, with Hibernian, with Rangers. In Hibernian, Russell Latapy is a god. As a matter of fact, he got them to come down to Trinidad years after to play in a friendly, because they still consider that as a god. When you look at some clips of Russell when he played with Hibernian, listen, for those of you who never saw him, look at some clips. There are clips all over the place. You will see the genius of Russell Latapy. And of course, with the national team, my God, Russell was unbelievable. Russell is those type of players don't have to train as hard as the rest of players. Russell could go out and come back in and put him on the field, and you cannot tell the difference. His performance would always be. I have never seen Russell Latapy had a poor game. I've never seen him have a poor game. Those are players. Listen, this whole show I could talk about Russell Latapy because I have said it. The greatest player I have seen locally is Russell Latapy. His teams have won cups while he was there. Hibernian, Falkirk, Rangers, Porto, and he himself has won numerous individual awards. Numerous individual across the board. You know. So for me talking about Russell, well, you could see it in my face and hear it in my voice.
Well, here what I want you to do now. Give us a third person, because you all the way into Russell. I need another person who had done, who you think resumes.
Well, Dwight York's resume, I think, would top everybody's own. And
so talk about Dwight.
I'll leave the other guys to start to talk about Dwight York.
Yeah, I thought in the same breath you would go that direction, considering the relationship they have also, you know. It would be nice to just go one time with it. But yes, I think, again, I would try to go now purely on accolades with Dwight York. Being voted at one point in time in the top 10 best players in the world, you know, speaks a lot. I think at that year, he might have been 9th. Can't remember exactly, but I seen him in the awards and all of that, and the list there, and, you know, feeling as a proud Trinidadian to know that what you would be watching to hear who, we had somebody that was actually up in the runnings there. Dwight York, you know, from Aston Villa, that is a cult hero there. You know, his seasons there, his performances there from the go, you know, has been, I think Aston Villa fans to this day still wish they could kind of go back to that, you know. They would speak, they support Aston Villa because of the era he was there, and still hoping that one day we could, you know, reinvent the wheel and have another era like that. And then at the time when he went on to Manchester, you know, that was a record signing at the time, you know. how much thousands of pounds per week. You know, these were things that for me on a resume sits well because this is what you now have negotiating power to move in this player anywhere around the world. And even if, you know, sometimes, you know, there are periods in his period where we saw a little decline, Dwight was still able to secure top contracts because everybody's still hoping that, you know, from the Birmingham, from the Sunderland, all of these clubs, still hoping that Dwight would still show something. And even when he went straight down to Australia, you know, he still went there and he scored numerous goals. I think the club even won,
They did.
you know, down there with him to the point that he could have even extended and he still could have played there. So that speaks well for him in the time that he played football and his individual accolades, you know, from being the top goal scorer for the club, you know, just being man of the match over and over. You know, Dwight Yorke was somebody we all played the video games, we all watched TV. We have that iconic sharp Manchester T-shirt from 99-98 season. And even in that short period, his resume, even if we just watch it 3 years, but we still could speak of all the other years of Dwight's, you know, his peak of his career. And to this day, he's an ambassador for Manchester. He continues being in all the talks of all the great players. His name still pops up, and that speaks well for him individually. Puts him, even without the clubs, it puts him up there as one of the top players ever, resume-wise.
Well, I would say, for me, I mean, if we're speaking purely on resume and we use KPIs such as clubs played for, awards won, trophies won, and the levels, Dwight is unsurpassable from any other local player. Purely on the having played for Manchester United sets him apart from everybody else.
Yeah.
And then what they won while he was there puts him even further. So without a question for me, purely on resume, Dwight Yorke stands alone as a local player.
Not as passionate on performance, right? Like Russell, but that's all right. I'm just messing with you.
Russell and I same height, so that's
Go ahead.
For short word.
Go ahead, Jefferson.
Yeah, I think this is what Steve would be talking about in terms of resume. Obviously, the crowning achievement, winning the Champions League in that unforgettable game against Bayern Munich. You know, in that run, beating Barcelona to get to the finals, and that game in itself was
dramatic.
You know, a really, really excellent game. And during that campaign, if you look at the goals that Dwight Yorke scored, obviously he was a real force to be reckoned with in the European Champions League, right? And I think in terms of club competition, you can't get a more prestigious competition to not just to play or participate in, but to actually shine, dominate, and eventually win.
I think, and you know, you guys didn't mention it, but for me, he took our country to the only World Cup, and he captained it.
That's true.
Right,
Yeah, we really missed
but
that too.
I
That's
can put
true.
a plug in there
That's
for
true.
Russell again, who came back into the team against Mexico.
Right.
That made the difference.
That put us
Remember
into the
Mexico
final game. Yeah. But
That
I mean,
Mexico game.
that-
But again,
that's correct.
Dwight came
did,
back and
being
did
the captain, yes, he did take
change
us
position as well.
into the World Cup. That's true. That's true.
And it's like he was on the stats because he has the most tackles, which is not a big stat,
is
but
not Dwight.
most tackle in the whole World Cup and all of that. That means he
And
he extended himself.
it goes to show that, you know, because of the career he had, his CV and the teams he played for, that level that he had to keep at, whether fitness or just, you know, technique and all of that, put him on a World Cup stage where for him this is what I'm normally playing around. So
Right.
he had to be the person to come into the team to say, here, what? Maybe you all may not all be up there, so let me take the role now to run and tackle these guys and pass because I am accustomed playing around this. And I think that's what set him apart in terms of his individual performance, that he was one of the guys that you saw was comfortable on that stage. That was every Friday, every Saturday for him. So, you know, he really did go out there and do what he had to do.
In addition, he went to play midfield.
Yeah.
And I mean, like strikers like myself, when we're talking, it's like, does midfielders have all that space? Because we don't have space up front. And he went and played midfield and was buzzing around and really, he was the live wire on our national team, and he make everybody tick. Yeah. So you got to give him credit for that.
Oh, yeah.
And won Triple Crown in Manchester United. Correct. Which includes the European Cup, and everything else. So
and to be, you know, the reality is in the resume. If we even look at the resume and we look at the angle of players around the world who might have looked to say, who's the threat? He was the threat. You know, every team you were facing were worried about what Dwight Yorke could do to us. You know, and that for me is always, you know, we were looking and saying the best goals being scored in that era. Dwight Yorke was the guy either supporting the play or scoring the goal. And that, I think, meant that this entire team, you know, the entire whatever was on him to do the damage. Every game they were playing against, the teams were worried about him. And that speaks well for him, that to this day, you know, we still look back and say, if we could have a Dwight Yorke on our team. And I think if it wasn't for Manchester, Dwight Yorke probably was on the tongues of every other top European club during that period. If he hadn't been secured there, he would have been anywhere else, I believe, at that point in time.
Yep. For sure. Dwight really lit up the whole the football stage at that time on a world level and made all Trinidad and Tobago very proud. Yeah. Very, very proud.
If you look at the price too, because Ferguson is not a manager who would overspend. He wasn't reckless with the purse at all, and to break the transfer record to bring him to the club, that shows alone the type of market value that he had around that time.
Yeah. If there was any negative to him that I heard was really, and I've heard it for all of us, every one of us, when we come back to play for Trinidad, we don't work as hard or we don't do as much.
That is a fact. That is a fact. I think in Dwight's case, because he was the most high-profile overseas to come back,
right?
Everybody expected a replication of his club form for country, right? But for the length of times Dwight played for Trinidad, after he was contracted with the English team, Dwight really didn't have much outstanding games for Trinidad. He would come and he would play, but you wouldn't say his performance was outstanding.
Right.
You know, and I think it was only when we qualified for the World Cup, we saw all those years of experience coming into play to keep that team together and to be able to perform on the world stage. But in between that, there were very few outstanding Dwight Yorke Trinidad games. That is true. That's a criticism against him. But it is, I think it is true, having seen so many of the games with him, you know.
Well, Larry hit the nail on the head. It's not think it's true. That's definitely true. I think Dwight Yorke would have recovered some of the admiration of the local fans based on his performance in the World Cup. Right? Dwight Yorke his performance with Trinidad was forgettable. Right? If we look at the goals that he scored, you know, for Trinidad and Tobago, you know, you have to look for them. Really, right? And,
well, there was no Beckham.
I was going to touch on that. I was going to say,
I ain't passing up on that.
Quality of players.
I was always going to say, you know, these guys, as much as, yes, we would say he didn't perform, you know, is it kind of more like, around him, you know, we used to have a joke in school, we'd say, Dwight probably would say, Beckham, the last strand here on my left eyebrow, just put it right there. And that ball will come right there. Now entering that, if you came back, how many persons might he have had to make it that easy? And I guess all of you are playing on the national level at some point. You probably realize the difference when whether your club didn't have all the good players and then you go to the national team with better, or your club had better players. Dwight Yorke, what we saw looking as beauty was probably because it was easier to do there. With any good player, I think it's easier because the quality is high. When you're in a difficult situation, that beauty doesn't look beautiful because it is a little more, you know, it's harder to construct, you know, with that level of play he was around and the speed and all of that, it really looked better. And I think when we just didn't see it, he may have been running his heart out on the team. He may have been kicked. Well, he wasn't. Not the running. All right, I'll take that back. But he may have been wanting to, but it just didn't come. But I understand.
I mean, you know, I understand what you're trying to say, Narada.
But yes, okay.
For us who sat and looked at the games, when he came back, we left with a feeling he didn't give his all.
All right. Yeah, I understand.
You know, but I understand as a former player, there are times when to adjust back to your national team, sometimes it's difficult. But that you would say that for 1 or 2 games.
Yeah. Right,
But
not
Dwight
for-
had an extended...
Clear,
Dwight
correct.
played
Okay,
over
I'll take that.
70-something times for Trinidad.
Yeah.
Right? And
And if you
cannot
can't
really
remember 20
pinpoint
great-
10
Yeah.
outstanding games for
Fair
Dwight.
enough.
Probably one of his best games was the 1988 Shell Cup in Grenada, where he scored the 2 goals for Trinidad to beat Grenada in the finals. You know, one was a fantastic free kick. Right? But that was before he became famous, you know.
Yeah.
And after that, you have to stretch your mind to come to a game where you could see Dwight Yorke stood out. Right? His reputation was on the field.
True.
But the performances didn't always duplicate what we have became accustomed to with his club jersey on. You know what I mean? So you
and
take
I'm
that
not
how you
saying-
want.
I'm not disputing the fact that Narada, I would say it was difficult, obviously. But when you come to play here, you know, you see a lot of those players in Africa, I think when they go back to play for their side, they
play.
demand.
Yeah.
Right? When Dwight Yorke came to play for Trinidad, everybody outshined. Right? And he didn't run. Yeah.
Well, it's something that a lot of foreign players, local foreign players, are guilty of.
Correct.
When they come back here, they always feel they're coming back down,
Yeah.
and it's my way or the highway, or it's on my terms, or you know. Unfortunately, a lot of our foreign-based players are guilty of that.
They're on vacation, man. They just came back to. But you know, and we as a nation, a people, we are very critical.
Yeah.
So that's part of the problem. All right, we need to take a break. Viewers, we'll be right back after the short break.
We, from those encounters together, and this was a North-South game to open the season.
So the team might be playing well, as we always say with Trinidad and Tobago.
Futsal did that great for me.
Okay, hey everybody. Welcome to another edition of Field of Dreams on ACTN. My name is Steve David. I'm your host. Okay, welcome back, viewers. All right, guys. So we have spoken 3 guys. We say Shaka, Dwight, and Russell. Now, who's the next one? Larry?
Me?
Big Stern.
Oh, I thought you mean Larry. We were talking about Larry.
Yeah, Big Stern John.
Stern John.
I think is somebody who, as you say, Trinidadians, you know, we mark hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we really, particularly for sportsmen and things like that. And if Stern was of a different nationality, he would have been a huge icon because of the amount of national goals that he scored.
Correct.
Right now, people always say that the level of competition that you play against is why you score that. But when you look at teams playing in Europe, playing against Andorra and Gibraltar and them countries,
Liechtenstein.
Liechtenstein, they're not scoring those goals, right? And a goal scored is a goal scored. You can't take it back. And the reason why the strikers catch such a high price is because it's the most valuable thing in the game, right? The goal scored. And that is something I think for us, Stern John is a legend. And the criticism that we lodged against Dwight is one that we cannot put against him, though. Every time he put that national team jersey on, he was outstanding, right? I mean, towards the latter part of his career, he was criticized and so on. But I think based on what he's done and the amount of goals that he scored, right? Of course, he went into the MLS where he was huge, right? A very outstanding player, and then moved into Europe, right? First. And I think a very, very big resume. Third goal scorer, I think still is third on the international all-time goals for his country, right? Against lining up with people like Ronaldo and Neymar and so on, Pele, right? So to be called in that illustrious list, I think that in itself is something that is a credit to him.
For sure. I think Stern John, what for me, puts him in a sort of iconic realm is because we all had the little jokes we would make, you know, Stern bound to score, whether it's he would score the ball with his neck, he this, that. We would always talk these things, but the reality is for us to be talking about it means the player had to be of a certain caliber that we expected a lot from him, or we've heard so much and we're not seeing it. So, you know, those things, even though the critique may have been a little harsh, it's really because we were accustomed or wanting more for him. And I think Stern, you know, starting in the States and with Columbus and all of them, he is iconic there, you know. Yeah, Stern had something, I'm reading 55 games with 44 goals. So, you know, that speaks a lot, you know, speaks volumes for him. And then going into Nottingham Forest and then Coventry City and Ipswich. So he had almost 10 years, you know, on that circuit. Every year, yes, kind of move into a club every season or two, but it still meant that in looking for a striker, in looking for a forward, people were still saying, you know, this guy could put in 10 goals, 18 goals a season, you know, and that is what he was able to do and continue on a career, even though, you know, Ipswich Town and all these clubs. But his accolades in terms of with the clubs may not have necessarily been much because of where the club sat on the table. But nevertheless, his CV would be a guy that for 10 plus years was able to secure overseas contracts, which speaks volumes to any player being recognized as having a very high CV, because everybody was still wanting a piece of him, even coming down to the end of his career with Sunderland, even with during the World Cup and stuff, because I mentioned it with Xhaka, but it was really to be Stern and Carlos who got that deal. He was there, you know, and those guys featured well, and he did his part for about 10 years.
Obviously, I mean, you don't score 76 goals for your national team without having some level of pedigree. Regardless of who the opposition is, you can only play against who's put in front of you, right? And Stern was a striker who everybody had a high expectation of finding in net whenever you went to see him play, whether it be with Trinidad or with his club team. But that record that he has for playing for Trinidad is, I mean, when you line it up against, as Jeff was saying, against other strikers of repute and their countries and their goal turnout, up to this day, still standing very, very, very strong. All right, people may say, well, you know, Trinidad is playing the CONCACAF region and whatever. But still, when you look at the fact that if this is the CONCACAF region and tell me Trinidad, you are going to play Tobago, that is who I have to play against. You know. But to put the ball in the net, as you, Steve, would know, that's an art. I know players, you put them from the 18-yard box in their area to the opposing team 18-yard, and they are brilliant. You put them inside the 18-yard and they fall apart. You see, to put that ball in that net, it's an art. To some people, it comes easy. So people like Steve and Stern, it came easy. You know, they don't care what went on in that 18, that space between the 18-yard and the 18-yard. You see inside that box, that's where it has to happen.
That's good.
And you had Stern on your team, you believe that any point in time in the 90 minutes, you could score. Yes. And if you are on a field with Stern John, you feel at any given time that you stand a chance. For somebody to bring that belief to the rest of the team as a striker speaks volumes. And then, of course, his record was so good that he was able to move abroad over into the MLS, which at that time not much Trinidadians were playing in. Correct. And then to excel in the MLS, so much so that the European teams were watching him and took him to England. Again, if we use the fact that English Premier League was one of the top leagues in the world, to play for any team, even if your team was mid-table or struggling, is a tremendous achievement for a local player. When he was at Birmingham, which is why I think he had his most successful stint in the English League, he's a cult hero in Birmingham because he found the net numerous amounts of time. And again, to replace a local English player in those days as a person who coming from a nondescript place like Trinidad, you had to have something. So Stern's contribution as a striker representing Trinidad in an English league and with his national team jersey on has to be noticed. and has to be given its rightful place in terms of what he has achieved. Sterns' resume is a very, very strong one. You know, it's somebody who I'm sure a lot of the players now, fortunately, he's still within the football fraternity as a coach. As a matter of fact, I read where, is it Anguilla?
Yeah.
He's signed to be the head coach of Anguilla. You know, so he's passing on his expertise now to the other generation. Hopefully, if the forwards on those teams could be half as productive as him, they would achieve a lot. But Stern definitely needs mention in our discussion today.
So as a striker, he's probably a better striker than Dwight, but he doesn't have the resume like Dwight.
Yeah, right.
With,
I mean, in terms of his goal production, he has more goals than Dwight.
Right.
Right? But then we're talking about national team representation.
Right.
You know, if we move over to the club, Dwight would overtake him. Because we're talking about resume. If we were to sit here and say, who was the best player in Trinidad? We would see some names coming up that we're not even discussing here.
Right.
Because we're not looking at resume. We're just looking purely at performance. Right? Because we would have to bring in people from other eras, like Leroy De Leon.
Right.
Who some people still consider to be the greatest to pass through Trinidad.
Right.
His resume wouldn't match up to these present-day guys because the opportunities back in those days were limited.
And that's one of the things that you look, because you have an opportunity to compare players who were seen to be in his era as world-class. Drogba, you know, the Follands and, you know, even Inzaghi, these players, you can actually see them, and then you have the numbers game, which numbers are like, I have more goals than you, right? You can see where you want after that, you know, and again, any day, Stern can say that, there's only a few people can say that Stern don't have as much as them. That's basically what it is.
Is there any other player that could get honorable mention in this topic?
Marvin Andrews has a pretty decent CV. You know, when he plied his trade with Rangers in Scotland. Rangers has been together with Celtic, the two top teams in Scotland for numerous years. And Marvin would be a starter in that Rangers team and won numerous trophies and titles with Rangers while he was performing for them. And he wasn't a bit part player. You know, Marvin Andrews was a starter of repute. You know, and he would beat out some international players to start for Rangers. And he was well loved by the supporters because for those of us who saw Marvin play for Trinidad, Marvin is a never-say-die player. He would put his head anywhere, in a hand's nest and in front of a truck. You know, he just never gave up. He defended with his life. And everybody with the national team, we admired Marvin because he was a leader on the pitch. By his stature, he was huge. And the guy would just move through anything. He would clear with ball and forward, you know, to ensure that his goal was defended at all costs. And Marvin was a gentle giant of the field. You know, you saw this big man and you figure, oh, off the field, he must be a real roughneck. He was a gentle giant of the field. And it lent to his reputation in terms of his character. You know, obviously, his exploit with Rangers is what has really propelled him into the international limelight. And he's well loved by a lot of people within that Rangers fraternity. And those of us who have seen him captain our national team and play for our national team still hold him very highly because he gave his all for us when he was on the field. All. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Marvin Andrews definitely fits that stature of having a very powerful resume, as you going back to, because of the length of time he was able to play for one of the best clubs in Scotland. I think he was a very good fit for the type of football that he played in Scotland, direct football. And he was very strong in the air, dominant, you know, in the tackles and stuff like that, and really crunchy tackles, you know. So he never, he was uncompromising. Right?
That's right.
In terms of his play and his approach, and in terms of titles, he won several titles, both cup and league titles with Rangers across here. So I think he fits in.
How does he come? I mean, how does he practice? Does Marvin practice as hard as he plays?
Yeah.
Listen,
Yeah.
the first time I went to train with the national team, we were doing, the training didn't start. We were doing a little scrimmage thing. And that put me out for 2 weeks because Marvin was covered at knee to knee. Oh my gosh, I still feel the pain.
The reason I asked that question is
Marvin and
because
them is the type of players who train or play as they train, or you could say train as they play. They don't know what is a friendly, let's put it that way. They don't know what is a time to relax. Everything is played one way, one speed, one intensity. You know what I mean? So they don't have to switch on when game time comes. That's just how they play.
Today, if we have wet match, I want Marvin on my side.
well, that's Celeris Figaro too. That's why I say that. Yeah,
I was going to say that. He is
it's one way. And don't put your foot there, because he coming.
Yeah, they're little players like that. I mean, I want them to be on my side because, I mean, after playing days, of course, when you want to just knock it around and think, these guys stuck in their competitive days, so you want them to be on your side.
All right. So we talk about 5 players. Who topped that list?
Dwight York. Dwight York sits at the top of that pile quite easily. Quite easily.
Because of what his club achieves, right?
And he
Not
has
so much
achieved.
as an individual.
Both for club representation and individual accolades.
Right.
Dwight sits alone. Right? Because at club level, the highest trophy you could win at club level, he won it. In country, which is the Premiership, at Europe, which is the Champions League, and then when you come down to Trinidad, he took us to the World Cup. Sits alone, quite easily.
Trinidad, I never say, but he didn't win the World Cup. So we collectively, we think Dwight is head of that list.
Well, he would get my selection.
The resume. He would get yours. What you would say?
Yeah, I second that. I think Dwight easily would win based on the team accolades, the individual as well, right? Because of where he played, top scoring for the team that he performed with. So yeah, Dwight definitely has my vote as well.
Yeah, I will have to that same.
You don't have to.
No. But I think even if I break it down statistically, I think Dwight still pips them simply because I think even every year, he would have been in the top goal scorers at the club, whether at Aston Villa or even at the other clubs that he played, Manchester and stuff. Whereas some of the other guys may have had a season out or 2 and whatever, and may not have necessarily been the main guy. Sturgeon and him are kind of competing in terms of their individual accolades at the club. But I think Dwight, because of the stature of the clubs he played with, it would have been 2 points against 1, kind of thing. So Dwight York would have to be our player with the heaviest CV during that era for sure.
So I like you guys to get a little brain teaser. So Dwight has got it. So who would we say has the second spot on that? Who got the second place, the silver medal?
No, it would be Russell for me.
I think Russell too.
For me, it would be
Russell for you as well?
Yeah, I think Russell.
I may differ because I might say Stern.
Stern?
Yeah, because I think in the resume, Stern moved around quite a lot. But the career was very long, and the movement, though in the championship kind of division, wasn't too bad. And I think for strikers it's difficult because every team is wanting somebody who could put 20 goals. So that means every year some team was saying this guy could do 20. As a midfielder, I think teams are a little more reserved. If Russell is good, we keeping him right there. We're going to give him a long contract. Strikers have it a little harder.
But Stern team didn't win.
They didn't win, but clubs kept thinking if we sign him, we will win. So it was always like looking for him to sign somewhere. So I might have preferred to try and get a Sturgeon.
No, that is always crazy.
Manager agent.
Yo, guys, I think we come to the end. I want to thank you guys for being here, but appreciate your comments, and I'm sure the viewers did as well.
Yeah.
Viewers, thank you for tuning in every Monday night at 8 o'clock, and we repeat on a Tuesday at 1 and a Saturday at 1. ACTN, thank you for the opportunity. Viewers, keep watching. This show is ended. Go in peace. My name is Steve David. Good night.